This is a special meeting, budget discussion, January 6th, 2021, meeting for the first time in person for a long time. And hopefully we won't run into too many technical glitches. We'll do our best, and we have, I think, only one person online that I see. But Mr. Fairman is there, and Alyssa Harlow is taking notes in the background. And I can't resist saying that this is a sad day for our country and for democracy. And I know this is not the platform for that discussion, but it's remarkable to see that we've gotten to a point in this country that this is what happens when there's so much complicity and dishonesty, and it's pretty scary. So we'll try and keep this meeting relatively brief, but we have a lot to cover. So any adjustments to the agenda, Karen?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I'm respectfully requesting that public comment on items not on the agenda be added so that I may make a brief public announcement about petitioning of town meeting warning articles.
Okay, sounds good. We'll add that right after this then. So there are no adjustments to the agenda, and we don't have any minutes to pass to approve today. So that would put us on to public statement. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but public comment. So, Mr. Fairman, if you would like to make a comment, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After our discussion at the last meeting about petitioning warning articles, I thought about that, and I worked out some guidelines for doing it during a pandemic, which I have submitted to Putney. And also, if anyone wishes to contact me directly, this can be done through Town Manager Astley. Basically, it can be done safely. And I'm mentioning it this evening simply because at your next regular meeting, the deadline will be tomorrow. So now is when we have enough time if anyone wants to do it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. We still have not gotten just an update on that. We're still waiting from information from the Secretary of State as to how to conduct, as people know, if they are petitioning to be on the ballot for an elected position, they are not required to collect signatures at this point. For articles, they are, however, still requiring that. So we will see, as you said, at our next meeting, whether we have people who have petitioned, and or we will need to decide which articles we would approve without signatures if they have not gotten them. So, and I know
Mr. Chairman, I'll just briefly add that I consulted the Office of the Secretary of State, who said Act 162 applies only to petitioning to be on the ballot, not to town meeting warning articles, and that's the law. So they said, basically, you're going to have to figure out something for yourself. So I did.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. We'll look at that and see where we go from there. So, select board items for discussion and action. First item is library preliminary budget draft 2. So we have a copy of that.
It's in there. Sorry, it's not in the order.
That's okay. So, and we've been over the library budget already. There are a couple changes, I believe. Two changes. So we should cover those and then see where we are with that.
So on page 1, in revenue, the Edwall donation, which is normally $5,000, was reduced to $2,000, which then increased the transfer in general fund from 184,616 to 189.
184, if we had a $3,000 change,
And there might have been another change.
so there's
in there. It was,
something else that shifted a little bit.
Yeah, something else did shift, Josh. I don't recall it. I think it was in our first,
Well, the electricity changed, right?
yes. Or the
And-
heat. It
and
was the heat.
I think both of them changed.
Yeah, I reduced those a little bit.
Okay. So, but this current budget, as it reads, which total revenues read $227,000, $227,000 and $227,200,
That is correct.
of which the transfer from the general fund or the allocation from town taxes would be $189,000.
That is correct. And we have total expenditures of the same, $227,200. This budget is very tight. As you can see, it was an increase of $4,332 from last year. But again, I reduced one of the revenue line items, and that's the shortfall. And we knew we might have shortfall with revenue. And the Edwall Trust, which is based on dividends, is not bringing in the 5,000, because we also give 5,000 to the general fund and to the highway fund. So those two line items also were reduced.
So, and just to be clear, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but the actual increase in the library budget year over year for the proposed budget is it's about $1,332
That is correct.
different. So
That is
the
correct.
change, the 4,332 change that you're referring to is the transfer from the general fund, i.e. the town allocation
That
to
is
the library.
correct. That is correct.
So the library budget has all but remained level. It's
Yes.
just a change in how we
Yep.
contribute to it. And the Edwald Fund, as many people know, investments right now, unless they're being very actively managed, they are not doing very well. So it's somehow not surprising. But and I can't remember. We have not actively managed the Edwald Fund in quite a while. I'm not sure it falls under our purview to manage it. Is that correct? Do you know, Karen?
The bank manages it, and we receive a check, and we just received a check a week ago.
For the reduced amount.
No, because the check we received last week was $15,000, but that's for this fiscal year.
Right.
And,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, at some point, we should probably look at the Edwald Fund and see whether we should be managing it differently, but I don't
Right.
think that's something we need to worry about right now.
not right now.
So you're saying that instead of being able to use all $15,000 split three ways, there was less of that money available because of the loss in the fund,
Well, except
Well,
this is projected, David.
Till
So
next
the
year.
15 is
Right.
current for this year, but yeah.
Because we've been losing money over several years now.
We've been taking from principal instead of, yeah.
got it?
Okay, so are there any questions or comments about the library budget?
I don't have a question. Are you able to email me these? This updated, I have the one that we had for the last scheduled meeting. Are they changes at all from then?
No, so they're all on the website,
Okay.
and you might be able to pull them up right now.
I actually have them from the last meeting, so I just want to make sure they're all the same. Okay,
The only one that changed is the general fund,
okay,
I'll tell you right now.
okay,
That's in your packet.
okay.
What percentage of the general fund is the library budget,
Um,
just roughly?
let me just see.
189,000. It's
I thought it was like 12%.
it's got to be more than 10. Yeah.
Karen, you told me, this is Emily speaking, you told me it was 7%.
Yeah, I changed that. Did you not see the new updated graph?
Emily, I'm guessing that would have reflected when the general fund and the highway fund were still together. It would have been about 7%, would be my guess, but 12% recommend. I mean, our total.
I'm referencing an email that Karen sent me earlier this week where, remember you said that the fire department is 10%, the library is 7%?
Yeah, that's changed because I had the
Oh.
revenue in there. So the revenue was offsetting the expenses, which was incorrect. So when I took,
Okay, got it.
took the revenue out, the library is at 14%.
Okay,
Check your email because I reset the spreadsheet.
That was that
graph.
pie. That was
I
that
do
pie
have
chart.
that, I have that, but I just didn't see I don't see where that it's reflected, or I didn't receive a full general fund one, just the library one, but thanks.
Okay. I mean, I can share this, but I'm a little nervous. You want me to share it on the screen?
Try, see what happens.
You're talking about the Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah. let me just see.
14%, 1/7. 7 times 4,000, 28 grand.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's not letting me share
Okay. Well,
it. Sorry. Maybe the next meeting.
this is. Okay. Anyway, so any other questions about the library budget? All right.
There it is.
Oh, perfect. There you go. So it's a little
Can you see it okay?
squished. It could be a little bigger if you can.
Good luck with that. You're asking for a lot right now.
Yeah, there you go. Like, yeah, I just don't know if it on there.
So 14%. Yeah.
Is that a little better?
A little better.
I'm sure why it's
Just came up on mine too. So.
a little screen.
All right. So highway department preliminary budget discussion draft 2. So
Do you want to wait on that one?
you want to shift them around?
Can I?
Sure. So
And
we'll.
I only say that because I want to get the easy ones out of the way first.
Okay. So what do you want to get? So we're not looking tonight, I don't think, Karen, to actually vote on these, are we?
No.
We're just sort of doing a final review and then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Sounds good.
yeah, what I would ask of the board is if you have questions, please ask so we can clarify on items in the budget. And then next week, we can talk about possibly approving the budgets.
Yeah.
So I want to make a comment about the library budget. I am, I'm comfortable with that budget.
Okay.
I don't want to really shift any more numbers because it's tight. And we already know that it didn't increase a whole lot. There's other areas we'll be looking at, okay?
Okay.
So
what do you want to look at next?
can we look at sewer
Sure.
and then water?
Yes. So sewer, we also have a copy of here.
The thinner packets, that's what we want to do.
Sorry, what?
We want to do the thinner ones.
Yeah, get those out of the way.
Forgot you were deaf. I'll speak more loudly.
Yeah. Ah,
Is Bear saying something?
yeah.
Funny town meeting.
I get these turned all the way up, I still can't hear you.
I'm mostly deaf in my right ear, so it's him I shouldn't be able to hear. But
Okay,
anyway,
all right.
You wanna do sewer?
So, comments on the sewer. So we did have an increase. And the increases were mostly because of expenses. I looked at actuals from last year and I increased certain line items like chemicals, testing, and there was another one that was significant increase. Probably in the next year, we're gonna start looking at, other companies that can provide chemicals and maybe we can reduce some of this cost. And, of course, sludge disposal, that's a specific service, so there's not too many people that do that.
so Karen, why do we show in FY20 actual no bond payment?
It is, if you look, plant improvements,
Where's that?
it's like on the second page. It's a little lengthy when they, yeah,
Okay.
it's the same way with the water department. Josh, it doesn't show, but it's in here. The way it was explained to me is, so the plant improvement, although it's only showing 1,250,
Yeah.
that's a problem right there
Yeah.
that I need to look into.
Well, it's also, it's a problem on our front page when our total expenses are projected, or our budget is 157 and our total is 130. I don't think that reflects an actual, so something's missing in the line items under
Right.
sewer expense.
Can I say something?
Yes.
When I make those payments, it gets posted to that line item, and then for whatever reason, I'm always told to journal entry it out to another line item.
Which line item?
So
What are the line items?
Which line
to
item?
I don't know on the sewer. I can't think off the top of my head, but like I know on the highway, it goes to the capital expense or the I don't know. I'm not looking at it, so I can't
Okay.
think.
But I don't see 20,000 extra anywhere else.
So,
I'm gonna go investigate.
Great.
Thank you.
2,751. Okay, so, because we've made that bond payment for this year, it
Right.
looks like, and the actual is almost identical to the budgeted.
Right.
So one would assume it would have been true for last year as well. So I'm I'm only questioning it because it doesn't make sense to look
Right.
at, not that I think we
I
didn't
know,
pay
and
it or something.
I've looked at that and I need to research it like Melissa just said too. There's some funky things that go on with the county. It's just, it doesn't really make sense. And then when you're looking at the report, it's like, all right, here's that payment. But we know the payment was made, so.
And you already addressed the chemicals, but you're budgeting for, okay, I see. Okay, the budget was 1515. Got it. Okay. Yep.
So what I could have done was just kept everything the same, but it doesn't really give you a true picture. Because then you're over budget year after year.
Well, I mean, our total expenditures and our total revenues are equal, which they should be,
They're supposed to.
but that reflects an almost 10% increase. Well, no, 7% increase year over year.
Right,
And so the vast majority of that is sewer operation expense, and that's as a result of the chemicals.
yeah, the chemicals and the testing, Josh,
Chemicals, sludge disposal, electricity, all of those show
Yeah.
significant increases. Chemicals, sludge disposal, electricity.
Yeah, it says over budget the last few years each time.
right,
So that's why you're upping it.
that's why I'm upping it, and we are collecting enough fees to cover the expenses, so I'm not concerned about this budget.
Okay.
Let's see if I can share. I'll show you the graph.
Karen, what's the line item that is blanked?
It's 402 5400 9000.
Okay, so when I paid it, that's where I paid it out of. But then I had to move it, and let me think about where I moved it. I'll be right back.
And Alyssa, just out of curiosity, when you say you had to move it, is that by the auditor instructing you to do that, or?
I think that was a journal entry at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, like from Chip, one of those entries that he said has to be made for some reason, and I've yet to discover the exact reason.
I know.
So we just have to, just so that our total sewer expense line makes sense, we
Right.
have to add that in there. And as for this year budget and actual, it does fall in here, but that's because you haven't done the year-end reconciliation. Is that why that would fall there?
That's correct.
Okay.
For 2020.
So do we wanna leave it that you'll investigate it?
Yes.
And then we'll move on, and Alyssa, you don't even have to do that for now?
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it for now. It's sort of irrelevant to our budget right now. It's
Right.
it's
Correct.
just something that's noticeable
Yeah.
if you're trying to look at where our increases came from.
So I do have just a general question or comment about, we had a discussion about changing the fee structure.
Yep.
And so I just wonder, where does that go in all of this?
That's a good question, Eric, because when I was looking at this budget and increasing, and I'm like thinking I was gonna have to increase fees, which I found out I didn't have to, which is good. So now we can take the time to evaluate how to fairly charge for utilities.
So I'm just wondering, should we have the goal be that for the following budget year, not this one, but the next, we will have figured that out?
Well, I hope before that.
I mean, do you think it'll change before? I mean, will it change like between budget seasons, or do you think
It
we'll
could.
change? Okay,
It could.
okay.
But, and I'll look at the balance in the fund, to
Right.
kind of gauge,
What we have to pay.
right.
Okay.
The biggest thing too is that if anything happens, we have an emergency, we have to borrow money, but we might be able to use some from the fund balance.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I think comes into our conversation currently, very basically, my interpretation of the answer to your question of where does that fit in here is that the user fees, we can't just show what that is as a revenue unless we're actually collecting that much.
Right,
So
right.
that's how it fits into here.
Yes,
So if we aren't, that's being made up somewhere else.
right.
But, the other thing that, we've been focusing on with the other budgets is, we have money in sewer fund reserve, correct?
Yes.
To the tune of approximately how much?
Is that not in here? That's not.
That's not, it's a different budget. It's a
Yeah,
different,
it's a different balance sheet.
Okay.
you don't have to tell me exactly, Karen, but if you could, I mean, is it a couple $100,000 or?
I think it's more than that.
Yeah, we
It's
talked
a lot
about this at
more.
one point. I think it's like almost
Yeah.
$900,000.
It's close to a
Yeah.
million.
So what is that? What is that? What is it? What is that 900,000 from and for?
It's in case we need to use it in case there's an emergency.
But where does it come from?
I don't know that. I haven't been on the select board long enough to answer that question.
Where does it come from? Like, how does it get there? How does it get to that pool?
Because so at the end of the year, when they do the audit, there's money that shows it's, left over, or you show a deficit, okay? And that money builds on the previous year's balance.
So this isn't for the sewer particularly, this is a general?
Now it's the
It
sewer.
is, so
Yeah.
you did, each year, it just a big chunk goes into
Not
this,
necessarily a big chunk.
well, it's 900,000.
Yeah, but that's built over since, that's built up since the sewer was put in.
When was it put
When
in,
was
Josh?
that? Wasn't that long ago?
Oh, it was a long time ago.
1977, right?
Yeah.
Oh, then
Something like that.
Yeah.
it was expanded.
Well, and the water, yes, the
Right.
sewer system has been expanded
Okay.
several, well, the plant has been not so much expanded as efficiencies have been approved there. It's also the nature of how we use water now as opposed to 1977 is very different. I mean, a household, ERUs, and we've had this discussion too, the actual usages versus what an ERU is.
Yeah.
But it expanded to include, for example, the central school
Right.
in, I don't know, the early 2010s, probably,
Yeah.
something like that. And numerous houses up on
Yeah, Kimball Hill.
Lone Pine, Kimball Hill, exactly.
Okay.
I mean,
That's what I was thinking of, okay.
Right.
So question, can that money be used only for the sewer system? Which I think you said yes.
That is.
And are we limited to how we use it in that system, in that budget? We can use it any way we need to. So if there's a
Upgrades.
catastrophe of some kind, we have to,
Yeah.
it's there for us to use.
well,
And that money would go fairly quickly if there was a big problem.
yes.
Yes.
And I mean, I think that we probably should do again relatively soon. I don't know how often this is recommended, but we cameraed almost all, if not all, the sewer lines.
Right.
2015, maybe, something like that. I think it was when Cynthia was
Did you say you cameraed them?
camera, so sent
Look at them. Yeah,
to
okay.
camera. And, there are necessary, well, there are not urgent, but there are things that will be needing repair. They basically come up with sort of it's almost like a capital plan concept of how they look at it and say, probably 5 years out, you're going to need, so we should, and Chris Hayes, who manages it, really keeps an eye on that.
Yes.
But, that's the kind of thing that if we suddenly need to do a new line somewhere, you go through $900,000 in a heartbeat. So,
Yeah.
So should we partner those two things, the restructuring of the fees and the reevaluation to do another camera episode? They
well,
happen together?
I think we would lean on Chris and Simons to
Right.
make a recommendation about that. But, I'm sure, Chris is obviously familiar with our budget and this reserve fund. If he thought there was anything we should be doing right now, he probably would have recommended that. But it's also given that it's built up to be a significant number, and it's the majority of our reserve fund across the board. And since it is only allocated for sewer, we might want to be at this stage. As I said, we did upgrades in efficiency not too long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 or 8. But we might want to push Chris a little bit on saying, hey, we've got $900,000. What should we be doing proactively?
So this may be a question for you, Karen, but in general, and I brought this up when we were talking about restructuring. does it make sense for us to have a couple of people on a committee looking at these things so that we know it's being taken care of and we don't have to go back to that?
It mostly falls to the finance director.
And
But
do you
it's-
feel like you want support with that, with a committee, or?
I already have somebody that volunteered,
Okay,
and I would have Alyssa also,
okay,
and myself,
great,
so we could suss it out.
okay.
There's also, I don't know how this works in this exact instance, but there's often support for that kind of thing from Wyndham Regional.
Right.
And there are subsidies that are available to underwrite that kind of thing. And we take advantage of those. I mean, very little of that has happened in the last year because of the circumstances, but, we often have somebody sort of looking into something on the side. So, but, the discussion about sewer and water has been going on for quite a while.
It has.
It's a moving target too,
Right.
but, as far as that $900,000 is concerned, we should be being proactive with it. Not that I want to spend it down if we don't need to, but it's a lot of money to have sitting when there might be, we might be able to spend $250,000 and save ourselves $500
Exactly.
3
By
years
doing
down
it
the road.
by preventative maintenance.
Exactly. So,
I agree.
You go on that.
Well, we have that assessment report too, Josh.
Yes,
done a few
definitely.
years ago.
Yeah.
And there's a whole list of things that
yeah,
have a schedule
Yeah.
that need to be looked
Yeah,
at.
yeah.
And some of those are big dollar items. And, this fund balance is actually $885,000. So
It's how much?
$885,000.
I thought it was almost 9. Yep.
Yep. So if we ever had to get a loan through USDA.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to have a match. So this
Oh,
type of reserve, we can take from there.
great.
Yeah.
but yeah, so I think that what we would want to do in sort of figuring, as you're saying, is what's the sort of, and this would fall probably in that sort of under the same ballpark as that Easton Allen review of what's the healthy number to have stashed
Right.
for your sewer
Yeah.
in case you have a problem. If that number is, for example, $600,000, we should be saying, okay, well, that gives us 3 to be proactive with. What should we be doing with it? So,
Yeah.
Again, I think Chris thinks that way somewhat all the time, but I think you can also push him that direction
Yeah.
and say, Chris, we're really looking at what's in here and saying, what should we be doing?
Right,
So-
because we don't want to do it when something breaks.
Exactly. And we have the data that tells us where our weak points are.
Right. And our pump stations too, those are critical because
Yeah.
when pumps go down, and we have different types of pumps in here in Putney. And like Wallingford has the same pump for every.
So they're all interchangeable.
Right,
Yeah.
and they have one
So
on
you,
stock.
On the
so
shelf.
it's pretty easy to have parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I have several Toyota pickups. But
So I'm
yeah.
learning
Yeah.
about, the utilities.
Yeah.
It's a big,
It's
it's a big system and
Uh-huh.
it's expensive.
It is expensive, and it's
Yes.
surprising. I mean, pumps being an example of something that when they go down, it's surprisingly expensive because
Okay, I'm totally superstitious, so let's stop talking about what's going down.
so we try and
You
keep
asked.
reasonable parts on the shelf, but
Yeah. So there's a graph of your budget for sewer. It breaks out, operation expenses at 36%, sewer expenses 54%, and depreciation is at 30. And that's a bouncing ball. Depreciation.
so when you say sewer expenses, I'm sorry,
I
I've
didn't
never
hear you
seen
very
it
well.
in that graphic form. Operations is 36%, David.
Right.
Sewer expense is 54%.
The bright orange, the dark orange,
Yeah.
And then what's the other one?
the
Karen?
yellow is depreciation.
Oh, yeah.
And all those numbers come from this report right here.
Right. So sewer expenses are just everything else the operation is a fixed that's our contract with Simons, right?
So sewer expense is your telephone, our contract with Simons,
Oh, that's included in sewer
Yes,
expenses?
the
Okay,
bond payment, the interest payment, and then administrative services assessment.
okay.
But I'm comfortable with the sewer
Yeah.
budget. I would not make any more changes to that.
And that also is really pretty close to level funded.
Yeah,
From
Well-
previous.
Yeah. Not really, it's up by 21,000.
No,
21,314.
what am I looking at? Oh, yeah.
But they're not-
oh, you're on the total.
Yeah.
On top.
And that's mostly because of
It's
operation
mostly-
expenses, and that's
yeah,
mostly because of
The chemicals and all the
chemicals,
stuff.
right, exactly.
Yeah, we keep going back to that same thing, don't we? Oh,
All right, I'm good with that.
Do any towns do their own instead of contract it out? And do it, is it too much
yeah.
hassle?
Well, the problem is you need to be certified.
Okay.
So we used to do that.
Yeah.
It was probably,
Archie did that.
yeah, exactly.
right,
And,
right.
you know, Robbie was part of it.
Right,
And
right.
then he did it up in BF
Tom
and
was
so on.
too for a
But
long time.
Tom was he was, yeah, some part of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, just to keep people certified is a huge project.
Yeah.
I mean, you always, and then there's got to be the person who's, you know, the licensed operator.
Right.
So it's just, we chose, I'm guessing, David, it was probably 2008 that we decided to go with Simon's.
And let them deal with all that.
And it, you know, the costs were very comparable and it just
I get
meant
it.
we didn't have to deal with it.
The
So
difference between
um,
leasing and buying sometimes.
we, you know, and not that we shouldn't at least lightly re-explore that at some point, but, you know, it was definitely the right decision at the time.
So Alyssa responded to your question regarding the payment. So the payment gets journal entry to the liability line, bond payable.
Where's that?
That's not on there,
Oh.
that's in a different,
Okay.
Weird.
so the liability needs to be reduced as it's paid.
Doesn't make any sense to me, but
Yeah.
It's okay,
yeah, exactly.
trust us.
I can, yeah.
I
Okay.
would kind of like it to make sense to me, but
I
it
know.
might take a while for it to get there.
Well, and I mean, you know, part of that might be having it on here with an asterisk or something.
Right.
Yeah, why isn't it listed in both places so that we can see it here and then it's accounted there?
Because,
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe I put a little note in there, that way next year when you ask the same
Yeah.
question, we'll have the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have all these really great notes that can just be.
One more question about the sewer. How does Chris Hayes monitor the plant too? The treatment plant? Is that part of what he does too?
Yeah, that's
And so we
Joe.
have a,
Well, Joe, but Chris is the,
so
Yeah.
we have some kind of assessment of where it's at and what might be needed there and when, just
Yes.
like we do the rest of the system.
Yes,
It's all part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good.
and that's where we did the majority of our, I mean, we put a different aeration system, we put a different chemical storage building, we did, you know, we've done chunks here and there to the tune of, I want to say sort of $50,000 to $100,000 at a bite, just to try and, you know, I mean, the aeration system we improved and that increased our efficiency by significant amounts. And then we made pump changes and, you know, so it's basically being able to treat the same amount of sewage and or an increasing amount of sewage because we have more people coming on all the time with the same plant, but the plant is still from 1977.
Right.
So
right.
Why I asked the question.
yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So
If that would take all that 900 and then some if we had to deal with that.
oh yeah,
You know, like
no, it's
many
amazing.
times that.
Yeah, no, it's surprising how
Yeah.
surprising how expensive that is. But it is the kind of thing also that, I mean, like the aeration system, that was, I don't know whether it was a new invention at the time, but it was like sort of this state-of-the-art thing that was available that saved us, that increased our efficiency so dramatically. It was like Yeah, no brainer, we should definitely do
Yeah,
that.
we
So,
need to look at it again.
Are we going to water?
yes,
Yes.
Excellent.
pushing me along.
Yeah.
Come on. All right.
The water budget, same thing, I had to increase some line items, not many, this is a very small budget. Not too many expenses. So I'm comfortable with the way it is, and I wouldn't change anything.
The only question I have, Karen, is that on the second line, user fees,
Yes,
the memo says increase, but the line says negative. So I was confused by that. Negative 1052.
maybe I need to change that. I might have changed that, I didn't change the note.
Okay.
So I'll just change that.
So just should be decrease in line with actual expenses?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So,
So what happens when, it's like a two-part, so you have your expenses, right? Then you have your user fees, and then, I don't know exactly why they're, split in two lines. Because what happens when we collect the water, it actually goes in that top line as a user fee.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, it's bond only and total system.
yeah, so the bond is paid out of, that's part of the collection for the bond.
Okay.
And then the other line item is for the user fees, so whatever's the residual. Because if you look at 2020, we collected, it says $102,280,
Mm-hmm.
but 79,000 of that would be,
Wow, yeah.
part of the bond figure. Or the bond, it's the bond,
Aaron, you're in a,
no, it's the bond user fees to pay the bond. The bond,
Right.
right,
But then we have this weird other thing here in our 2020 of user fee total system budget and actual, there's zero in the actual.
yeah, because the year before, I know what we did, so we reduced it to 79,000. And then the remainder got journal entry into that other line item, Josh. And that would give you, more user fees, but
okay, I'm completely lost. Sorry.
yeah.
So, can I just ask a clarifying question, or you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
So, just looking at the first two lines and the
Yes.
first two columns, can you explain why the budgeted was 70, on the first line, the budgeted was 79,000, the
Yeah.
actual was a lot more. The next line, the budgeted was 68,500, and it was zero
Right.
for
So-
actual. What is that?
So the $102,288. So when it's collected, it's put towards this code number, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the year, what we need to do is journal out part of that money to offset the line item below.
Okay. Is this another accounting thing where it's just not going to make sense to me that
Yeah.
there's a zero?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Okay.
whole.
I mean,
It's kind of like the sewer thing.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
it's a way, the way we do it. It's bizarre, and
Well, what's great is that we got the audit back, the draft audit back,
right.
and they were really, really happy with most of the
Everything,
things.
yeah.
So I feel like I don't need to understand it
Yeah.
that much.
No, I agree. No,
It's
I,
hard to explain
Yeah.
too, because if you're not in it,
Right.
like I'm not in it every day.
Yeah.
Like Alyssa, who's the assistant treasurer,
Mhm.
she's collecting the money.
Yeah.
She's making all the journal entries, although I do sign off on those journal entries. So,
And you understand it at the time,
right.
but now, yeah, I get it.
And then, when the auditor comes around at the end of the year, which we only had a couple of journal entries, which was really good. And, you know, so,
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that bothers me about this presentation is when you show budget and actual for previous years that just don't make sense. I mean, you know, that doesn't reflect that doesn't reflect the actual. Because
Right,
it doesn't
exactly.
include the bond payment,
Right.
is what it appears to be.
yeah.
So so that doesn't, or the user fee for the bond payment. Anyway, no, as long as the auditors are satisfied, then that's the main thing. And
Next year, maybe I can, what does that screen say over there?
Slow network connection.
Do you guys keep going in and out, and I'm getting like every third word?
Yeah, there's something.
Welcome
going
to
on.
my world. Exactly.
And Josh, I can have a phone conversation and talk to you about what you were just talking about if you want.
no, I don't need to. It's just always frustrating when, I mean, I never understand these things completely because of exactly all this stuff, but I can usually make sense out of it with what's presented, and this one doesn't make all that much sense to me. So, but
It's a small.
Right.
again, as long as the auditors are happy with how it reads, then. So, is that sound a little better, Alyssa?
It's off and on. Sometimes you guys are clear as a bell, and then other times it just goes out completely.
Okay. All right. So, where do you want to go from there? You want to go to highway or general?
Let's go to general, please.
Okay.
So I did update this budget. I guess the only thing I really want to say about it is I tried to level fund the budget. I don't see how I'm going to be able to do that. So there is an increase, taxes to be raised. There's an increase of $33,691.44. Of that money, we have a new loan payment for the exhaust system down at the fire department, which I had to add $21,978 to the 22 budget. So I really don't think I can trim this budget any further.
So the overall, oh no, okay. Taxes
And
not
what
a big
also
thing.
happened in this budget, I had to reduce some of the revenue.
Mm-hmm. I see that.
So the penalty for property taxes
Right.
and the interest has been over budgeted for a few years. Now, I can only guess that what we can collect and then what might be left over, and I took that number,
Mhm.
roughly $150,000, times it by 8%, and then the interest is a little different because it's, 1% for 3 months and then it's 1.5%. So I had to gauge, because my original numbers were lower than this, so I bumped them up a little bit, and we'll see what happens. I think we were still out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, I think we're at about 1.5, is that correct, for property taxes?
Are you for the whole year or just what's still owed?
No, for 2020.
Oh, it's like $30,000.
For 2020?
Yeah. I'll go look.
Property taxes to collect.
Yep, I have tax admin up. I'll tell you in a sec.
It
We
can't be
haven't collected the third payment yet.
30,000 of what has been billed so far, probably.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Right, so the 30,000 is what we're still owed for 2019.
Right.
Right.
What is it owed? I'm thinking 1.5 is what's owed for 2020.
Yeah, almost there.
Don't scare me like that. Oh my God.
What do you mean? That was good.
Yeah, no kidding.
We'd be in big trouble.
So yeah, almost 1.6 for 2020.
Yeah.
And 1.5 of that, almost 1.5 is payment number 3 that isn't due yet.
Correct.
Right.
So, given, we still have to collect the third payment, which, most of those, well, 3/4 maybe, are like escrow taxes. So we might, I'm thinking $150,000 we might not be able to collect. That's a rough number, so.
In a timely manner.
Correct.
That's not that much different from usual.
Nope, no, I think it's average.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It has been lower, but
Yeah,
certainly has been higher.
I remember last year was lower.
130 something.
Yeah,
I
we
think,
did
was
better.
it?
last
Yeah.
year, yeah.
so I also want to make a comment that I did approach Emily Zervis of the library and Tom Goddard from the fire department, and I did ask last week if they could reduce their budgets. And at that point, I had asked for like $11,000 because I knew we were like, $30-some thousand shy to level fund. They both looked at their budgets, so I thank them very much for doing that, and they tried the best they could, but if we trim too much, other areas, you can't do other things, so we have to be really cautious. And my goal has always been to try to level fund all the budgets, especially now with COVID. I will state to the select board that we do have surplus money.
Mhm.
If we really truly want to level fund this budget, we could take some of the surplus and do that, and it would reduce that top line item.
So I have questions about that if you're done, Karen. That is
Sure.
the change in 33,691. I know, what's that reflect to the average taxpayer? I mean, it's done on property value. I understand that. There's like 1,100
So,
paying people in this town, 1,100 bills sent out, something like that.
100 properties approximately.
Yep. So that's, and I know this isn't an accurate way to do it. So that's $30 a bill if everything was even. And you figure it by every $100,000, is that right?
So 1 penny raised is $24,000. So you're looking at probably a penny and a quarter, not even a penny and a half. So
And when you say a penny, you mean
Per,
$100 of value.
yes,
$100 a thousand. Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
So you divide the 100, and then you gotta times it by. I know this is a little complicated. You gotta be in it to understand it.
I was just trying to come up with some kind of idea of how this would affect people.
Yeah.
And so,
Normally too, I would have a spreadsheet for the board. And it
we can
lays
come back to
out
that.
what the increase would be.
Yep.
But because these budgets are still kind of bouncing around a little bit,
But if you just do it based on what you're looking at here, David, it's a, ballpark 3% increase. Right?
Right?
Not quite. 2.5. I mean, you're looking at the difference between
Right,
$1,017,000
Yep.
and $1,050,000.
right,
Um,
yeah. Is it that one?
That would be high threes, then, right? Wouldn't it?
what's that?
High 3%. 1.17, 1.50.
But it's over 100, so it's about 3%.
I had 0.96, but,
0.96.
right. 107. But I think you're gonna move the decimal. Yeah. So less than 1%?
No. I mean, 33,691, if it were just a level $1 million budget, would be 3.3%, right? It have to be.
I have to do it on a calculator. And I don't have it. Let's see.
Yeah, I always find it helpful on the budgets to have the percent change number.
I know you do, Josh.
As a
and I've
column.
been using the dollars and you hadn't said anything.
I got, it's 3.3%.
I have 0.032.
Yeah, it's
Right,
3.3.
so it's,
Right.
which is 3.2%.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
Right. So I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Are we still on?
Go ahead.
David, did you have?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I can take mine if I have to.
So I read through every line and don't understand most of it, but I had a few questions. Under the Putney Fire Department inspection fees, and I'm on my computer one, so I don't know what page that's on, but it has 7,000 in the budget for the last 2 years and going forward. But the actual was 1,000, and then the next actual was 700. So I'm just wondering, is that just? You said to revisit it.
Tom's online. I mean, it's partly that. Presumably, Tom at least partly reflects just the reality of COVID.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
you're talking
projects
about
that got
Tom's
canceled.
line item.
But no,
No,
I'm talking about the last 2 years. So it's not related to COVID.
Oh, okay,
right,
So
but
see,
still,
under-
it's a Tom question.
yes,
it's under 100. It's like so it's on the first page, the second section, like
Right.
4 lines up from the bottom. The inspection fees, it just says 7,000 for budget 2020. The actual was 1,000. The
Right.
budget for 2021 is 7,000. The actual was 700. And so I'm sure it makes sense. I just don't know why.
so that's my note. So you're right, so in 2020, we budgeted 7,000 for revenue, but we only collected 1,088.50. And then 21, I kept it at 7,000, and then COVID hit, and so far, we're halfway through the year, and we're at $784.
Which is actually higher than the year before.
Right.
So what's gonna happen is, we're not gonna meet that revenue line item.
Right.
We're gonna have a shortfall.
So shouldn't we adjust that revenue in the projected
That's a
budget?
question for Tom.
Tom and I talked about this the other day. You want to speak to this, Tom?
Yeah, over the past, it's actually been, 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we were fine. Over the last 2 years, it's just been a simple fact that as we look at the coming year to figure out to decide on a revenue number, we look at what projects we are aware of that are going to be coming along. And unfortunately, the last 2 years, and again, will be the case that this year, more than likely, those projects that we've anticipated, the property owners have not just had the money to proceed with the projects, or the developers haven't had the funding to proceed with the projects. So that's why we're running under. This coming year, I don't know. It's a gamble. We won't know until we get into the construction season.
But it's probably safe to assume that it's not going to be $7,000.
It could be. It could be very easily if the projects kick off.
What can you put it in perspective, Tom? Like you talked about a couple projects. What does that generate for inspection fees for you for doing an inspection on a
Well,
single?
it's not necessarily the inspections are covered. It's all blanketed under the permit fees. So just, I mean, in theory, 2 projects could bring us to that $7,000 if the projects happen.
Okay.
And I wasn't suggesting that we necessarily change it if it makes sense. I just noticed it and wanted to bring it up and make sure that we were aware of it.
Yes, I am aware of it.
I have another question while Tom's here, and I was wondering if you had any more insight into the electricity billing that you talked about last week.
No, not yet. With the holidays, we just couldn't get connected with any significance with the power company.
Okay.
So if not tomorrow or Friday, then next week I'll get hooked back up with the engineer.
And that reflects a question about that line item too, and that's why I asked that. So, yep.
Yep,
I have some other.
right, but I'm gonna keep that line item where it is.
Yeah. You put it up from 37 to 7,000. Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, we can gauge this because if it goes down, then obviously there's something we need to look at. And but this will be a good test, and I'd rather be safe than sorry, because I am risking on some other line items that I'm okay with right now, but I will be monitoring what's going on.
I have another question, a different section on tax listing.
What page are you on?
We're page, I don't know, it's under the staple. Page 6. Item 1343010, salaries.
Salaries, Yep, listers,
Yep.
yep. So that's an increase. I was waiting for your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was obvious.
So the last couple years, so 2020, we budgeted for 25,000, and we only had 2 listers.
Got it.
Active listers. So 21, I reduced it even more because I knew that we had 2, available and 1 kind of like on call.
And normally we have 3?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And those are elected positions, so we should be having 3 listers.
And that salary line also includes, maybe I should look.
Just
Oh,
3.
travel and meetings. Okay, so, but travel and meetings, but this would include training too. I mean, that's one of the things, salary, because when we train somebody, we pay them salary under the salary line item for getting trained, correct? So when we have a new person come on
It's going to be
and have to train them up, it's going to be that much more. I mean, essentially, I would say, this largely reflects a decreased number and the fact that Jordy was mostly trained. I mean, Doug was training, but he didn't do as much training.
He
So-
did
so-
online training, and I think Doug's doing really well.
Yeah,
He's picked it
it's
up.
sort of up his alley.
Yeah, he picked it up, and he asked a lot of questions, which is great.
So my question is, if our actual is at 3587, because we're not really entering the time when they're going to be busy, so that's going to go up in the spring,
This is you're talking
Yes.
the whole
Salary.
department budget.
right? The whole department. And 24 would reflect a pretty accurate estimate of what 3 full-time listers would cost,
That is correct.
with a reasonable amount of surplus
I see
for
what you're
training.
saying. Yeah.
Okay,
And,
I saw the difference there, wanted
Right.
to explain it.
and I wanted to add to that, so the listers for salary, they are also in the budget for a 2.4% increase in salary.
So this is actually brings up a question that I wanted to ask. In general, I don't know the history and I don't know the details for town employees, but I was talking with my husband about, in this time of people losing their jobs and stuff, does it make sense for there to be a across the board cost of living increase, but no actual salary increases?
It's always a balance. I mean, we try and do a cost of living every year,
Yes.
and we try and be generous with that every year, because if you go by the federal number, it's often quite low, and particularly in a year. I don't know what the federal number is this year, but
2.4.
it is. That's the federal number. So that's a pretty good number, actually, because sometimes it's 1.1, and we try and go to we try and do at least generally 2% sort of thing.
Consumer price index too, I look at that. So, and I compare, and they're not always the same. One's a little bit lower than the other one, and then, they fluctuate, except for the federal one.
So, but then what we also try and do is it's always a target to keep our salary, our department heads, for example, or all our salaried people, relatively in line with state average type stuff.
Okay.
So, we've been shifting those, and I don't.
I'm curious, is there like a plan where at this year, in this position, this is the salary that is increased this much, or?
Well, it's been more, I mean, we've been playing catch up for several years now, of sort of saying, okay, in order to hang on to the people that we want to hang on to, we're going to need to adjust this by X amount.
Right.
And we've been doing that.
Okay.
We did it with the highway department.
We did it with
last
highway
year.
and fire.
And this is all based on statewide averages, or?
More or less,
Okay.
yeah, comparable town averages. There's
Okay.
a list, I can't remember what it's called, but I have a copy of it. I don't know how
Yeah,
your
it's
own copy.
compensation and benefits at BLCT.
Yeah, okay.
They do the survey to all municipal.
Is it by size of municipality? Is it sort of separated out, or?
It's separated out. It's a book this big. I can use it, but I want it back.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just asking general questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm new, I don't know what the patterns are, the protocols that you follow. So I just wanted to bring that up. My concern, again, not knowing all of this, is there are a lot of people who don't even have work.
Right.
Do we want to make sure we're not giving people increases that will then cost people who are out of work to raise taxes? That's how I'm seeing it.
Again, it's always a balancing act. And, the cost of living increases are really, my perspective is that it's pretty incumbent upon us to do cost of living increases because the cost of living increases.
And that's why I was saying across the board cost of living, with the idea of maybe not increasing salaries. And I'm not tied to that idea, I'm just putting it out there.
We're pretty well caught up on department salaries. it's a discussion, we need to, town manager salary is a point of discussion. But we're pretty well caught up on.
You brought it up, Barra.
I'm not trying to say don't give her money.
You better put your gloves on right now.
Ew, get away.
But,
I think you're amazing. You know that, right?
but we did do,
We're all amazing. We all work together.
This is from this is from a perspective that I really try to take in my life is it may benefit me, but is it fair?
Right, absolutely.
no,
That's
and,
where I'm
and,
coming
I get that. That's why I asked the question about increasing taxes.
Yeah.
Right.
and
It'd be really
it's,
easy, but
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, is it fair and to who? I mean, I think the one thing I can say from how I see that is that when you look at the number of taxpayers versus the number of employees, that cost of living increase is relatively small in how it affects any given
Right.
taxpayer. So,
The cost of living increase, I'm not even
right, yeah,
questioning.
yeah.
It's like that's a different category, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, this year we're largely caught up with our department head salaries being relatively in line with comparable departments. So we increased that last year and therefore don't need to increase it this year.
That's
Correct?
all I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, the highway department's.
Right, exactly. Fire department's taken care of.
Yeah.
So, and a couple years ago, we brought all our highway department people into line with averages for the state and also resifted by seniority, et cetera, so that those were,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to be the town paying the most, but we don't want to be the town paying the least either.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Okay.
we worked on getting them on schedule because of the increase in minimum wage too, right?
yes,
That was
that's right.
part of the-
Yeah.
I have another question. Are you good? You got $5,700 in here for an animal control officer too, Karen. What?
7,500.
Huh?
7,500.
Mine says 57. Oh, 75. 57 change. Got
Right.
it. Okay, thank you.
Um,
And what did we hear back from Wyndham County? I know they wanted to.
I have questions on the same things you have.
Do you?
yeah.
Well, why don't you just ask them on? I'll stay home and eat dinner.
All right, so he gave us the proposal. I don't know if I have it with me. It is cold in here.
Mhm.
He gave us the proposal for animal control.
Yeah, and how much it would cost.
I don't
each town.
remember that. We
That must
talked
be-
about
That must be new.
Yeah, I
I
think,
just got
yeah.
it this
We
week.
talked about the concept of it and he
Right.
talked,
Yeah.
we had got further.
But
Right.
it also is gonna it's gonna vary depending on which towns buy in.
Yep,
So
Right.
if there's 5, there'll be, and if there's 3, it would be more. So
Yeah.
right, and I don't have it, sorry.
But your number probably reflects having read that, right?
Yeah,
no,
What you
no,
saying?
this was
Right.
from before that. Because you had this in the day we talked to him at the
Well,
meeting.
he may have averaged, may
yep.
have had some sense of that before.
So my question actually about this is, why don't we use that to pay a Putney specific person to do it?
We would love to. It is
You can't
all but
keep one.
impossible
You.
to keep somebody.
No,
Right.
seriously, I was looking into doing it and I didn't see, it looked like it was a volunteer position.
No, it's a per diem position is how we
Right.
typically have done it.
What was it?
It was $1,800.
And what was the per diem?
$1,800.
Like, what does that mean?
No, well,
So,
no, I mean, we had $1,800 budgeted, but it
Yeah.
wasn't an $1,800 stipend. It was a per hour, wasn't it?
right, per hour.
Right,
So
so
what
per diem is per hour,
So what does
basically.
that mean?
So that means every time you get a call,
Right.
you keep track of the hours that you put into a call. And with Josh, what were we? It was somewhere around $18 an hour, wasn't it? Something like
Yeah, it was up there.
that. It is remarkably hard to keep somebody.
So,
I mean, we have
How
had.
many have we had? And how?
It's a remarkably
We had
difficult
one
job is what it
good
is.
Yeah.
Well, it is unless you're. I mean, the
Henry Farnham's.
And so,
Henry Farnham was great. The challenge to it is that if you don't have some degree of law enforcement background,
right.
many of these are almost more about the disputes between neighbors
Yes,
than they are about the
Barking
animals.
dogs.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's hard to enforce.
So I think I just wanted to bring it up as a question to make sure it was something we talked about and then follow through it, I think it makes sense to have somebody with training do it.
Yes.
I just didn't want to be spending a whole lot of money on something if we're actually not needing it. That's the only concern I have, is that if we're going to be paying an annual fee and we don't actually need it except for 1 year out of 5, I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah,
It's
no,
just that it's so good to have that, and the times you need it, it's
So-
such a pain when you don't have anybody to deal with it. And
It actually defaults to my office, Sarah. And then Tom and I work together, especially if there's a dog bite, because he's the health officer.
Yeah.
And, you know, I get many calls about barking dogs.
So it would make your life a lot easier to have this.
Well, we have no enforcement.
Yeah.
In Putney.
Yeah.
And, you know, if the select board wants me to enforce the ordinance, and I have to go to court.
Yeah.
Where would you rather me be?
Right.
So then my question actually is just because it's the sheriff's department,
Yeah.
can they automatically enforce because they're a law enforcement person?
No.
So what do they do that's different?
Not any more than what I'm doing now.
well, that's not true. I mean,
Well, they do animal abuse. You know, if there's a dog bite or, you know, but they won't respond to a barking dog. And that's the biggest, you know.
So, but I mean, I'm sorry, what I mean is not the existing sheriff, I mean, given the new proposal
Yeah.
of an animal control officer through the sheriff's department, would that person respond to a barking dog?
well, it would depend on if it was a significant repeat offense with proof, then I think yes.
Right.
So what I would love.
They're not gonna sit there for 15 minutes and
Right.
show that dog's barking.
and part of the problem is that there's so many different rules from town to town.
Right,
And that's one of the things that would be great about having one in county do it.
Right.
but
They
so
would-
that's what I'm trying to understand is, because what I hear her saying is they're actually, the Wyndham County Sheriff's Department isn't gonna do what we are needing them to do. If we're needing somebody to respond to a barking dog, they're not gonna do that. So we actually are not fulfilling that position.
I would like to get the proposal in front of the board.
Yes, yes,
And then we can determine
Yeah.
this next
Yes.
week,
yes,
instead of trying to make a decision right now.
Yeah.
We don't have all the information.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
I would like to see it,
Right.
and maybe ask some more questions. I can do that on my own time.
Yeah.
I think part of the answer to your question is that when it takes time, it takes a lot of time. Typically, I mean, Sandsland a few
Yes.
years ago,
Yes.
we had a cat hoarder a number of years ago. You know, they come up and they're just unbelievably complicated.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of time. The other thing is when it's a dispute, whether it's barking, you know, barking dogs, there are a whole bunch of criteria for when they would respond to that or not respond. But if it's a dog bite or a nuisance dog,
Right.
somebody in a uniform showing up
Mhm.
is a whole lot more effective
Definitely,
Right.
and much less likely to turn into a
definitely.
volatile situation.
Right.
And the risk of, you know, we can't ask in good conscience, we can't ask Karen to do that.
Right.
You know, our most successful animal control officer previously was Henry Farnham, who's, you know, a lifelong public servant, knew how to do that kind of stuff and diffuse it. But if you don't have that, you just don't get good results. And there's risk involved in that
Right.
for us. So.
Okay.
So talking about Wyndham County Sheriff's Department here, we do have a proposal. And right now, in our budget, we have 2,000 hours, which is $82,000. They level funded for fiscal year 22. If the board, this is an option, you know, in order to reduce a budget, we could cut hours.
I've thought of this, but I don't have enough
I'm not
experience
sure
here to
that's
know if that's a
a
good thing to
positive
do.
recommendation.
Yeah.
The
The one component of that is if you reduce hours, your per hour cost goes up
Yes,
very significantly.
Oh, so
It
we
would
won't
go-
necessarily be saving money.
You do, well, you
Maybe-
save money, but you get not proportionally.
But you might save enough to cover the animal control officer, so you get the animal control officer and a reduced number of hours, and you still spend the same amount of money, so
Right.
Oh,
that's a thought.
okay.
So, right now, we're paying $41 per hour,
Yeah.
2,000 hours a year.
Yeah.
If we reduce the hours, it would be $52 per hour,
Did you say 52?
52.
52 from
52.
41.
Yep.
Okay.
So even if you cut it in half there, you know, you drop it by like 30,000. Just check them out. So 52 times
We're paying for
1,000.
you said 2,000 hours, is that right? Yeah.
Right now, we're paying for 2,000 hours,
Got
so at $52 an hour for 1,000 hours a year, it's $52,000. So,
And now we're paying 82
We're
for
doubling
2,000.
that, exactly.
Right.
So we
Doubling
save
that for $30,000.
$30,000.
yeah,
So we'd save 30, spend the 75 on the animal control officer and put 22.5 in the bank.
Yeah, I guess I would
But
want to
do we
know.
want to cut it in half?
but here's
That's
my
the
question
problem.
to the board.
And that's a huge,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I
does that leave us liable in some way?
Right.
Yeah, the other thing too is, so there's a revenue component to the Wyndham County Sheriff's Department, so when they write a ticket, we get some of the revenue, not all of it.
Yeah, not a lot.
So in this
Oh.
report, on page 1, I believe. My glasses keep fogging up, I'm like, oh.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can find it. Oh, so on page 2, sorry, like halfway down,
Ordinance fines?
local ordinance fines.
Yeah.
So 2020, we budgeted 8,200, we collected $5,511.11. So 21, of course, with COVID, you know, they weren't stopping
Right.
too many vehicles, so I increased the budget to 8,500, we're only at $1,486, and we're halfway through the year.
So
That's gonna hurt right there.
It's also, I mean, that is a choice we have as the select board in guiding. I mean, we could say, we want you to spend, of those 2,000 hours, we
Right.
want you to spend 1,600 of them giving tickets out.
Yeah, we would be loved by many.
Well, that's exactly it. And there are towns that do that. So, I mean, Plymouth, Vermont is notorious for that. That it's a revenue source for them, but they have a constable, I think it's a constable system. And there's benefit, or maybe it's a local sheriff system, I can't remember. But somehow somebody comes out ahead by the more tickets they give. So they give tons of tickets.
Yeah.
And the town comes out ahead. But yeah, it's really unpopular.
Yeah.
So it also really takes from, you know, the whole idea in contracting with Wyndham County Sheriffs initially was to really enhance our community policing.
Right.
You know, if what they're doing is sitting there giving tickets all the time, they're not doing a whole lot of community policing. You know, it's really hard to know the value of what you're getting for your money with the sheriff's department. And you know, you sort of have to depend on, and I've done this every year that I've been doing it, I asked the sheriff. And honestly, I think it was last year, Mark said, well, you know, you could probably get away with less, but I really don't recommend it.
Right,
And,
exactly.
You know,
And
who else are you going to turn to?
Yeah, for me, I would look probably almost anywhere else before I decided to try to look at those avenues for reducing. That's my approach.
But even with that said, we need to look at if that used to be a revenue source for us and isn't going to be anymore, then we need to be aware that we're going to be spending that $4,000 isn't coming off the cost of Wyndham County. So we need to just know that it's not 82,
Although,
it's 86 or whatever.
no, other way around. It's not, it's not 78, it's 82.
Right, whatever.
But yeah,
So
you know,
just to be aware, of that.
one would assume that in the upcoming fiscal year, it'll start to shift back to more of that. And again, we can guide that. We can say, we want more ticket revenue. But it's also, you know, if they give a ticket on Route 5, we don't get it. So it's only on the smaller roads because Route 5 is a state road, then the state collects that extra bit of revenue. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Fairman.
as you may know, I walk around Putney quite a lot, and I would suggest that the advantage of the Sheriff's Department running radar is not so much the number of tickets they write, because it's the people who aren't paying attention who get the tickets. I can see the car I can see the patrol car in the distance, and I see all the brake lights come on as they too see the car. So really, what they're doing is they're slowing down traffic, and it's only the ones who weren't paying attention who get caught. But a lot of other people are not driving as fast as they usually would.
That you're absolutely right, and that has certainly been a topic of discussion for us in the past. Yeah, I mean, presence and visibility is a huge part of what we're paying for. And you know, I mean, interestingly, I think you're right. I know you're right. Anecdotally on how it affects traffic. Interestingly, I'm pretty sure that I recall that the data on how it affects crime does not reflect that, which is counterintuitive. But it does have a big impact on traffic. So, and it's also, you know, I personally think there's value in having that visibility, and that is part of what we're paying for as well. So,
And there are things behind the scenes.
Right.
I don't,
a surprising amount of them.
right.
Say that again, Karen. I'm sorry.
There are concerns behind the scenes that,
Yes.
you know, the Sheriff's Department is aware of.
Yeah.
That, like, my office is not.
Right.
So, I mean, we do have the capability, we get a report every month on where they've been, and we can log into STARS and get a whole report on there too. So,
That's good.
I scan the report when it comes in every month, you know, just to see, you know,
That's good.
what kind of activity is happening.
That's
So,
Do you have another question, David?
Go ahead.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. I think I've
So
all the
overall,
highlighted stuff.
again, I tried to level fund it, but
So we talked a little bit about using some of the surplus. We started the year with around 202, and 12% of that would be what you said, 150, something like that.
yes, so
12% of the budget would be
Well,
yeah,
our budget is
12% on operating budget, okay, is $159,304. And that's what we would want to keep in the surplus in the general fund.
so
theoretically that's $42,000.
Yeah, like 43,000
Okay,
that we have available to us.
that we have available.
and still keep 12% in reserve just in
Right.
case.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
So that's a thought too, though.
And it's not in reserve, it's actually in the it's
Got it.
surplus within the general fund.
Still learning the proper language,
It's
and
okay.
always will be.
Well,
I
there's-
over my tongue too, David, it's like,
Yeah. No, the basic difference is that it's undesignated.
Got it.
So we
Right.
can choose to, if it's in a reserve fund, then we can't say,
We have to use it
let's
for
offset
that.
taxes, exactly.
Right. So if a person has a $10,000 property tax bill, a 3.3% rate increases $330.
Correct.
So that's just, so if anybody's listening, they can, okay?
right,
Because
No,
rough,
because all we're talking about is the municipal, which is a small fraction. So if they have a $10,000 tax bill, chances are
oh, it's
the municipal
3.3%.
the municipal portion of that is, you know, $3,800 or something. Well, let's see, what would it be? It's 65.
This is good to know. I'm a taxpayer in Putney. I'd love to know this.
Well, I mean, if your taxes that you're paying regularly and you're not in land use are roughly $10,000, then roughly 33% of that is town, and roughly 66% of that.
So it'd be a third of 330, so it'd be 110.
Exactly.
So
right. And that's what we talked about today.
But that in that context, you can rest assured, or I can almost guarantee that you can rest assured that the education tax is going to go up more than our tax is going to go up.
Right.
So, you know,
But we have no control over that.
Right.
I'm just trying to inform people
but
about
if you're talking about somebody with a $10,000 bill and how much it's going to go up this year, our part might be 110 and the education part might be 450. So
Right.
their taxes might go up by $560.
Right.
You know, who knows?
But we have no effect. We only
have
have
no
effect on
ability
our
to
part.
control.
Right. Exactly. Got it.
So
Okay.
that's where we're at with general.
I have 2 more questions.
But to finish that, just
Oh, go
one
ahead.
sec.
Sorry,
If we did decide to use some of that
Right, surplus.
surplus, we could affect our portion of that tax bill
Correct.
to in a positive way.
And we have enough to offset the change
Yes.
completely, so
That's-
we could level fund
Yes,
by doing that.
that's correct.
Which is a thought. I've thought of that.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
is that something we should talk more about now? Or do we want to wait until the next meeting after you've done a little more?
Well,
I'm not going
I'd-
to tweak this much
I'd vote to
more,
wait.
Okay,
but I think you should think about it.
Okay.
Go through this again. You should have my notes in your packet,
yeah,
and you'll have all the numbers right there to look at.
I think one component of that, Farah, is thinking about, we really have to think about if there's any one thing to the tune of $42,000 that we really think we should be spending money on this
Right.
year
right.
that we haven't thought of, you know, then,
That's kind of
then
what I
should
wanna
that
ask.
go there versus
Yeah.
going towards offsetting tax?
Okay. I have a couple other things.
Go ahead. I'm all set now.
So on page 3, 4th line from the bottom, the miscellaneous line, I don't understand why the actual was 6,000 when the budget was 0. What is that? Do you know?
Hang on a minute.
I don't know, but we should get more of those.
So that could have been if we sold something, which,
Okay.
it could be just about anything. I'd have to look it up,
Okay.
but,
I'm sort of, I don't know a lot about budgets.
No.
The things that flag that are like these kind of things that I just want to make
Yep.
sure they
I-
make sense.
I was just gonna say it might be grant programs, but we have above there miscellaneous grant programs, so
right.
it's not, it presumably doesn't fall under that.
And I'm not sure Alyssa recalls.
She can find it out, but
So then another question is on page 4, like a third of the way up from the bottom, computer IT support.
Yes.
The budget is $9,500.
Yep.
And it looks like we don't use nearly that much, at least the last 2 years. So what is that?
So we had an increase for 21.
Mhm.
Right now, our IT person is on call, so when we have a problem. And with cyber attacks, I'm not comfortable with our setup in the office.
Okay.
So we went out and got some quotes, and for 21, we raised that budget. I haven't contracted with anybody, we're on the verge of doing that.
Okay.
And this is a yearly expense.
Okay.
And just to let this board know, we have a remote computer in our office, and it allows certain people, like Emily, to remote in and go into NEMRIC and get certain reports. And our payroll person too remotes into this system. Well, over the holiday, New Year's,
somebody else remoted.
somebody hacked into that computer. So we called our IT person, they came down, grabbed it, they had to wipe out, they took the hard drive right out. They had, and I have it in my office in case, something happens down the road and then we have to give it to the
Can
police.
figure it out. Yeah.
But that was a $900 expense.
And as far as we know, we didn't lose anything either valuable or
No,
sensitive.
so they just got to that one hard drive. They did not get into our server, as far as they can tell. So that's scary stuff because towns get,
Ransom.
ransom, yeah. they get their held hostage.
And I also, given, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have that, I'm just wanted to bring it up. And I also feel like we're doing so many things remotely now that are using the computers more that I think it's wise for us to keep something in that line item. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and that's a tight line item right now.
I have one other question. It's under, let's see, this general fund, I don't know what page it's on here, but it's under, truck equipment maintenance 100-4580.
That sounds like Tom's department.
And it's just, I just trying to educate myself.
Yep.
Sorry, where were you? 100 what?
100-4580.
That would be on page 10. 4580, oh, so the whole,
The equipment purchase actually is, so it's 8,500 and then the actual was 22,900.
Yep.
And then the next was 85, the actual was 13. We want to keep it at this low number because,
well, sometimes we get grant to offset stuff, especially a line item like that. So some of that is gear. For 2020, I would have to look it up to see. Tom, do you recall?
it's more a question of does it make sense for it to stay as low for the budget when the actual is so much higher? That's all.
Most of it,
Some of that for 2020
yeah,
was equipment purchased off the grant.
right.
Okay.
Some of it during 2020 and all of it so far during 2021. Well, no, there was some more grant related purchases in there off the as well during 21 during this year.
Right.
But the majority of it for this year has been new protective equipment for new folks. We do everything we can to recycle as it's appropriate, our protective clothing and so on and so forth. But when it simply can't happen for whatever the reasons, then we have to purchase it. So that accounts for that, some of that overage. In reality, we try to stay within that $8,500 budget. And barring not barring, but along with the good thing about us getting more people, there comes the fact that we need to buy things that are unanticipated. So that's where we pull that from.
But it's still, but what you're saying is it makes sense to leave it at 8,500 because a lot of the other stuff that goes over that is covered by grants. Is that right?
At times, yes.
Okay.
But ultimately, the reality is, and I've asked this question for several years. Can we increase that line item just a little bit? And inevitably, every year we're in the same jam that we're certainly in this year. So maybe this year with everything else that's gone on, this wouldn't be the year to bump it up a little bit. But at some point, to answer the question, yes, it would make sense to increase that line item just a little bit at least to give a little bit of cushion.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
So what we look at too, we can see where we're over or where we're under, because like the hose fund just below it.
Mm-hmm.
So 2020, he only spent $358 out of a $5,900 budget, right? So I focus on the bottom line.
Okay.
So the total truck equipment maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
so it's budgeted for $244,900, but he only spent $234,229.
Yeah.
So in my eyes, I'm like, okay, he's over there, but he's way under here, and overall, he's still under budget. So I'm good with that.
All right.
So, and these department heads too, they're focused on their budgets. They know
They know where it's over and under.
It's, in most of the time, Bear, we can justify, you know, especially like Josh said, with, you know, jackets and pants and helmets, you know, you need that stuff.
Yeah, no, I was more
Yeah,
thinking of, do we wanna make sure there's more money in the budget, as Tom was saying, but it makes sense that this isn't the year to do that, so.
Right. And it makes, you know, it makes Tom more aware of what he can and can't spend. Right, Tom?
What did you say, Karen?
I said it makes Tom more aware of what he can and can't spend.
Keeps him honest.
Yeah, keeps him in line.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on general fund?
Nope.
Karen, I'm not, or Josh, if I may,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Tom, you might have more.
Karen, are we gonna discuss tonight the capital reserve proposed budget or budget proposal, however you wanna term that? Or no?
I don't think we are.
Okay,
I think, well, yeah, not for general fund, Tom, I think we'll do that next week.
okay, good deal.
Because it depends on what happens with some of that surplus,
Okay,
okay?
good. All right, thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
for your
Tom.
time.
All right, have a good night.
You too.
Tom.
All right.
So highway budget. I'll wait for David. I think it's cool.
It is.
Sorry, but I don't like being cold. I should walk the truck to it, never lost it. It's a little late now, but
I wonder whether we still have a Capitol building.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I forgot for a little while ago.
I know, right? Ooh.
how's it going?
Oh, the New York Times headline reads, "Mob incited by Trump storms Capitol."
We have to thank Emily for staying too.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Thanks,
not- yeah.
Emily. Thanks for staying.
So how are you feeling about?
No problem. No problem, guys. Just let me know if you need anything. I'm listening in my office.
Oh, thank you. I was gonna say, how do you feel about this sort of setup?
Seems good.
It's
You
a
like,
heck of a lot easier, I have to say. I mean,
Then
it's
the
just,
Zoom meeting?
just flow of conversation.
The only thing I don't like is,
I know,
I much prefer being at home without the
I know,
mask, but,
no, I agree.
I mean, we could alternate.
I would make a suggestion though, that when, especially Barra, for some reason, when you talk, if you could pull it down so that we can actually, you're a little muffled when you talk.
Pull it down?
No.
Yeah.
I can't pull it down.
But
I can
we-
try.
Well, aren't you 6 feet apart from each
Yeah, but it's still, I could speak more loudly.
other?
Um,
Okay.
What'd you say?
We could also, I mean, we're all wearing the disposable masks, which I don't like, but they're definitely better for auditory, so. All right, Karen, so.
so the highway department, right now it's level funded. There's a lot going on with this budget and what we've been talking about. So I confirmed today, and I misstated some information, I wanna correct it. So reserve funds are voted on by the voters, okay? So I had stated that this board could create an equipment reserve fund. That was inaccurate information. only people that can create a reserve fund are the voters. Whether it's in the general fund or the highway fund.
And they determine the amount of.
We can recommend,
Right, no, I know,
you
but,
put it in the article.
right,
Yeah, so what I learned today from VLCT, and I was having a conversation with our legal counsel about another matter, and he was the one that brought it up, and I just kind of like validated through VLCT. So I'm glad I did that, but VLCT also said, and I do have a draft of the warning, which I'll present next week, before next week. We established the equipment fund, but in that same article, we also determined an amount to start. And every year,
Right.
that's an article.
Mhm.
So-
to add it,
You mean
To
it has
add
to
to
be
it?
voted to redo?
Yeah,
re-up.
right, so,
Even in the highway fund,
so, yeah,
huh?
every year, so you have to have an article to designate that amount. So let's just say we say $130,000, so every year you would have an article. So,
Huh.
yeah,
interesting, I didn't know that.
yeah.
Huh.
So I just wanted to clarify that and just make it clear that it's the voters that,
So the challenge of that would be every year you would end up having a discussion about why are we doing this?
they do it in Westminster,
I'm sure.
yeah,
Well, we
and-
could streamline that, but we could.
Yeah,
yeah.
Couldn't we?
yes.
I mean, of all the things that we spend money on, the equipment to keep the roads open is pretty straightforward. And you
Right.
have a capital plan. And,
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I agree, but you know, wait, why are we putting $130,000
I
a year?
get that.
And every year it would be the same, you know, essentially because that's, instead of borrowing money,
right.
Right,
this
Because
is.
by doing that, we're saving
We're
this much
saving this,
interest. this year.
exactly.
Right, exactly. And you're right, we would have to have the discussion, but hopefully we could pare it down. I wonder if having to vote on it has something to do with what Howard read in the statute last meeting about voters and money and having to, I forgot how he worded it, give it back, you know what I mean?
Well, it is,
Oh, right.
Right? And I wonder if this is a way they get to decide on what to do with that. So it is given back to them through funding for a piece of equipment in the future. It's given back to them in the future. Does that make sense?
but that's only if it's a transfer of surplus.
I was wondering, I don't really understand it, but that kicked off in my head when you said that.
So we need to decide, well, there's a couple things we need to decide.
we need to talk about, let me continue.
Yeah.
Try to.
Yep.
Kind of follow me on this, So in the budget, right now, on page 1, under no proceeds, you're gonna see $163,000. And that's for the loader, okay? And then on page
So,
Six.
and just so I'm clear, no proceeds means
Borrow.
money that we borrowed.
Borrowed
Right,
money.
exactly.
And we're on page 1 of the highway fund?
Yeah, we were down,
down below.
third line up, second line, third line up.
Yeah.
No
Got it.
proceeds.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
So, given that it's in the budget to borrow $163,000, as you know, I asked for a quote to finance the loader for a 5-year period. And I did receive one from Peoples. We would pay $12,225 in interest if we borrow.
At what rate is that, just out of curiosity?
That was at the rate of 2.50. I had Brian call John Deere and ask about a lease. If we, as an option.
Lease to own or just lease?
So we would lease it, and at the very end of the
We
lease,
don't it.
we pay $1.
Right.
Okay?
So similar to the excavator.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly like the excavator.
Yeah.
They go from 1 to 7 years on a lease. So he ended up with a quote for a 7-year lease not a 5-year, but a 7. I did ask him if he could get a 5-year.
It'd be nice to compare apples to apples, yeah.
So I may have that next week, and we can
Yeah.
look at it.
Yeah.
So for a 7-year lease at 2.95%, it's $26,152 a year for a total of $183 or $183,000, $183,064.
It's more
So
expensive.
it's 20,000 versus
Yes.
12,000 essentially,
Right.
Correct.
which is not, I mean, that's
That's-
both the 7-year and the higher rate. So,
So, given we have that information, and we know we have a surplus, and in your packet is some rough notes from Brian.
Where is that?
It looks like this.
I don't think I got that.
You always say that.
Sorry, I don't see it.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
One
Mr.
piece
Fairman.
that I forgot.
can I ask a question about that lease?
It's in the middle, David.
Yes, you may.
David. It's in the middle of the packet, the highway.
Perhaps this
Thank
question,
you.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Perhaps this question is addressed to the town manager. If we lease it, is maintenance included in the lease?
That's a good question, and I can ask that question of Brian.
Would be worthwhile to know because you see, if we buy it, then once I'm assuming it may come with a warranty, but once the warranty's out, it's all on us. But with a lease, they still own it, and so I'm just wondering, possibly maintenance or some of the maintenance is included in the cost, which would be a benefit.
Actually, I had that conversation with Brian today about the warranty. It's a 7-year warranty if we buy it outright, which the only thing included, or I think that's a pretty comprehensive warranty. It wouldn't include annual maintenance, we'd be responsible obviously for oil changes and things, and we'd be responsible for tires, but Brian says they've never replaced the tires on the current Kawasaki that we own, which is 10 years old. So tires are probably a non-issue.
I wonder if there's any loaner stuff in there too if you lease, if it breaks down. If they're liable to bring you a loader so you can keep working at no charge, or if there is a charge for that.
I would
Because
imagine
that would be
covered.
hugely beneficial.
I bet they figured out pretty well that you're going to get 7 years without it breaking down.
yeah.
Right.
But you never know.
Did you find the notes, David?
I did. Thank you so much.
Good. So moving along, equipment fund. With the surplus that we have right now. Do we establish the equipment fund? So,
Do we ask the voters if they would like to establish
Right.
equipment funds?
right. It's an option. And if we went that route, there's a possibility where we could take some of the surplus money. And as I stated last time, so 12% of his operating budget would be $139,746 that we would keep as unrestricted surplus in his budget. So that would give him $134,320 as excess surplus that we could, or the voters could, create the equipment fund.
Can we add to that fund? Or do they have to ask them each year and tell them how much we suggest to add to that fund? Once the fund is started, can we then just,
You can't, the voters.
we have to ask them
Yeah.
every year.
That's what she was
Yes.
saying about every year we have to ask.
Right.
So
So Karen, sorry, can you backtrack a little bit on
Sure.
how the purchase of the loader would fit into that? Or are you, I mean, you're talking about the establishment of an equipment fund, not the purchase of a loader.
Right, so we could take that 134. The voters can set the equipment fund up, right? If we were to borrow. There's different options, so we really gotta think this through. But the goal is, what does the town wanna do? Do we wanna continue borrowing, or do we wanna create an equipment fund where we can put money into it every year, and then eventually we're able to just purchase the equipment, not borrow, not pay interest.
Or at least pay for part of it and possibly borrow for part of it.
And we can do that as well. Josh, you made your comment last week, it's gonna take a little time. And from my conversation with Brian, it may take between 4 and 5 years
3 to 5. Yeah.
to get to a point where we're comfortable, because at some point, we're gonna have to be buying equipment. Right now, the loader's scheduled for FY '22, and there's a dump truck scheduled for FY '23. And as our payments fall off the long-term debt, which is also in your packet,
Mhm.
and it's hard to see on paper, but the proposed plan is, as highway payments and loans are paid off. So this year, we paid off approximately $48,000 in payments. But for fiscal year '22, we added a payment of $37,000. So technically, we only have like this $11,000 buffer. We could take that money and keep it in the budget, or you can put it into the reserve fund. You can't, but the voters could. So, if you leave it in the budget and you level fund it for the following year, that money will end up in your surplus, and then you can add to your equipment through that surplus.
You can ask the voters to
Yes.
add to your.
Yes.
It seems much easier to do before we knew we had to ask them each year, because how do we know what we will have for a surplus until,
We're not gonna know that,
right? So it delays it a year.
It delays it a year, yes.
So
Sorry,
each year
what
could-
delays it a year? Say that, oh,
we
I see
won't know
you're
what the
saying.
surplus
Yeah,
is
yeah.
until the end of
Right.
June, and town meetings in spring, so.
So we have currently, I'm trying to merge these two together a little bit. You were talking about having 134,000 in surplus that we would keep as the roughly 8 to 12% of budget that we would like to have in surplus. But we currently have how big a surplus in the highway department?
So currently their surplus is $274,066.
So what Brian has talked about is the idea of, and I don't know the legality of this. We can, I believe, we could choose to buy that loader outright, I think, perhaps even if we were ill-advisedly to choose to do that without asking the voters. We can do that because it's highway equipment. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes.
But if we were to choose to ask the voters if they thought we should spend $163,000 to purchase a loader next year, that could come out of that surplus. We're adding in an anticipated surplus from current fiscal year
Right.
of roughly $80,000. And then, so I'm trying to sort of reconcile the
Right.
proposal to purchase that $163,000 piece of equipment outright and still remain with the $130,000 as surplus and put some into an equipment fund.
So if
So you're
we're,
not gonna be able to do all that within this explain, okay? So how much you talking about doing fiscal year 22?
Well, 21, 22, and then 22. Well, we don't, like you said, we don't know
right,
because we don't know what the budget
Right.
will be.
Right.
I mean,
We
the
don't know.
surplus will be.
right, exactly.
I don't wanna play that game.
Right, no, I'm just-
Cause I think we're gonna get pinched hard about that.
Yeah,
So 274,000,
we know we have.
we have that.
Right,
okay?
right.
So Brian's thought process to buying that loader, we just spoke about the $11,000, right?
Right.
That we would have.
Which, sorry, remind me,
It's a difference, Josh, between the two lost payments and the new payment that comes out
Right.
next year. There's two payments here. Here, I got them highlighted. Here. These payments dropped off 48, and we added a 37, so the difference is 11,400.
but that's for 22, which is our proposed budget.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay?
Yep.
So.
So that could go on.
12% of the surplus is a good number to have.
Right.
for-
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
to clarify, the price that you're discussing for the loader, is that a guess, or is that the result of it being put out to bid?
That's an accurate number from one vendor, I believe, is what that is.
Yes.
Right.
That's the not having gone out to bid, but it's a, if we were going to do this, what would it cost us from one vendor? So we would want to go out to bid for it, but that's probably very close to what it would cost us.
Yes. So Brian was thinking about leaving 10% in the budget,
Right.
in the surplus, excuse me. So that would give him about $151,571 out of that surplus, okay?
Instead of the 130,
Instead of the ones.
Right,
because 130 is at 12%, right?
right. Well, no, 130 would have been, it would have been the excess surplus.
Right.
That would have created, the voters would have created a, equipment fund possibly. So he uses the surplus of 151,571, and we add the 11,629. That gives him, not quite enough, but we talked about last week about repurposing the sidewalk money.
That gives him not quite enough to,
Purchase the loader out
Right.
well, it gives him,
within
Pretty
$1,000.
close.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
very
know,
close.
So we could do it this way, and he could purchase it for fiscal year 22.
So,
Back to the sidewalk though,
Fiscal year 22.
right? Because that's when we're gonna purchase. Because we're in 21 right now.
Right, okay, so that's what, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not taking into any consideration any surplus from the highway department from 21. That's just,
Right.
and that's no
We don't-
projected money. That's
we
what
don't
we
know
know
what
we have.
Yeah,
Right,
we
got
don't
it.
know where 21 is.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, David, because once we have that number, he would have enough to just outright purchase that piece of equipment.
Unless we spend $80,000 on some disaster between now and July 1st, which is certainly possible, but
But we have
Relatively
that, we have
relatively
139,000.
right. No, I know, I get it. Yeah.
No, I get your point too, and how conservative and safe we're just trying to possibly build an equipment fund to get away from borrowing and saving money on interest.
So,
Can I just?
Yeah.
We are getting into details before we've even decided if we want to create a reserve fund. And so I wanted to just step back and answer two questions that we've had before us. One is, do we want to put off buying the loader? And I know your recommendation is to not. I heard from David that he was wondering about it. So it seems like I would like to sort of decide, do we want to put it off or not? And then the other question is, do we want to ask the town about creating a reserve fund? If the answer is yes, we go forward. If the answer is no, we stop. I assume it's going to be yes because we're talking about the details, but I just want to have those kind of clear questions and answers.
yeah,
That's you're right on. That's very good assessment.
so can I speak?
have a motion.
Can I speak to that? Brian is pretty clear that he has worked through this, and I didn't see the math related to exactly this, but there was that discussion of whether we put off purchasing it for a year. He's pretty clear that he thinks that doesn't save us any money, and in fact potentially costs us a little bit of money because of the likely resale value of the loader. He said as far as he can figure, and I think he said he had this conversation.
Yeah,
with
we
you
talked
as
for a
well.
long time. Yep.
As far as he can figure, it's pretty darn close. But it might save us a couple $1,000, might cost us a couple $1,000 is essentially what I boiled it down to. So his perspective, and he said he tried to talk himself out of this, but of course we, granted there's bias built into this, so we know that, and I'm not accusing Brian of bias, but it's inherent.
Sure, yeah.
He said, given that that's the case, he would really like to buy it next year because he's concerned that if we wait, and I think I brought this up last week, but really what we're talking about is, purchasing a piece of equipment roughly a year from now or 9 months from now, or we're talking about purchasing a piece of equipment 21 months from now. It's a whole lot easier to project out 9 months from now what the condition of your piece of equipment is going to be than it is to project out 21 months. So, I definitely get that argument. I think if there was a compelling reason, and if we have that $163,000 available to us, as Karen, we talked about last time, I guess just Karen and I, we in our sweep account, which is the account that's, quote unquote, interest bearing for us, it's like 0.1% of interest. I mean, it's almost non-existent. We have roughly $1 million in the sweep account, and it provides us with $225 a month in income or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's, 0.022 or 0.002 or whatever that is. It's a very, very small amount.
Right.
So, if we could put that money in an account and have it earn 4%, then waiting another year would make a lot of sense. But given that that's not the case, I think the argument for going ahead and buying it is sound.
Right. I agree.
It sounded like the piece that I got from David was not so much that the money would earn interest, but that we would get use of a vehicle for another year.
That's
And
true.
So that would be a benefit.
That's part of it. And the other part of it too is that if we can put it off for that 21 months, and then we have that second year surplus to put into the account, if we do that, then that lands us right around $300,000 in the account. And then we buy a loader and we buy a truck for cash without borrowing the money,
Well,
without making interest,
what
if the
I'm
loader
afraid
lasts that long.
I'm just gonna jump in here, but what I'm afraid of is, so if we push the loader back another year, and then that year comes around, and then you feel like you should push it back another year, because you might think it might last another year, are you willing to play that?
Well, Yeah, I mean, I am, but I'm a mechanic. I mean, yeah, I'm totally willing to play that, but I don't have to run the highway department.
Right.
I
and
think
this is the thing,
that the risks involved in it are ones that I probably can't gauge as well as Brian. I admit to that.
Right.
But I also think that a piece of equipment like that probably will last longer than the capital plan says that it should last in comparison to a truck. And if we're going to push things out in any place in this department where we get more money, value out of the equipment so that we can build this fund quicker and instead of slower, the places are going to be with a loader, not with a truck.
Piece of equipment like that.
So those are the places we need to look at. That's what I think.
I trust Brian's judgment. when
Yep,
it comes
and so
to
do I.
equipment. And the last thing I want to see is a piece of equipment go down and they can't do their job.
Me too. I wouldn't want that either.
Yeah.
We talked about it for a long time, and what he told me was that he found out recently that Hitachi had bought Kawasaki, but they did that in 2016.
Yeah.
And he said before he found that out, his answer to my question was, do you think it will last that next year? And he said before he found that out, he would have said yes, pretty much without question. But he feels like the availability of parts might be getting hard. So I did some research on that too, and to see if there's still a parts chain out there, and there is, but I don't buy from them regularly, and I don't know if it's difficult to get stuff, and I don't know what it would cost to rent a piece of equipment or how expensive that would be in the interim. Certainly, we don't want to put a lot of money into that loader. I agree with that, but.
It's also true, David, just along that line, that we don't know how long those equipment manufacturers will be open and selling. Like they could close down at any time.
Well, no, Kawasaki was bought by Hitachi, and Hitachi is offering new equipment, and they do have a parts chain to supply the old stuff, but they don't know at what point those pieces of equipment will get obsoleted.
Right.
And then you won't be able to get anything. There's no new parts being made. You can only buy what's in the supply line.
And could that happen within a year?
I have, if you were talking about cars or trucks, I could tell you that, but I can't tell you about it.
I mean, on a 10-year-old piece of equipment, I would think the likelihood of that is relatively low,
I would agree with that, but
but I don't know.
These are all things we're like hoping.
Speculation.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
right.
I guess for me, what I'm feeling is I don't know. I trust your judgment about vehicles, and I am with you on the getting another year use out of it. I think for me, I feel less and less comfortable the more pieces come into play that we have to figure out and make sure are going to be okay.
Well, it's always safer to get a new piece of equipment. There's no question. It's whether it's valuable
I know.
to get a new piece of equipment and when.
I know.
Well,
And so,
I feel better if we were safe, especially when it comes to this department. And I feel if we have the surplus to purchase that piece of equipment in the year that it should be replaced, we should be doing that.
and I hear your opinion, Karen. And I have a slightly different opinion, but that's okay. I guess I have questions about if we didn't purchase it, how long would it take to get one if it went down? Because we have the money to buy it. And do we have to plan on doing it at a certain time? Or if that money is sitting there in surplus and we could write a check anytime we wanted, could we just go up and get one tomorrow? It's not like a truck that has to be
Yeah,
outfitted,
but then
right?
you're gonna lose your value. If you're gonna trade in a broken down.
Well, if you're going to lose the value, you're going to lose it once a year. You're not going to lose it during the course of the year. So we either buy it now or we lose the value. Then if we lose the value, we should use that loader for the year we've lost the value.
No. But what Karen is saying is if it breaks down,
Right,
then you lose that trade-in value.
Right.
I mean, you know as well as anybody.
Depending on how it breaks
The the trade-in on something with a
Right.
trash
I
motor.
misunderstood what you
yeah,
said.
that's okay.
It's, I mean, I think this is where we would be well advised. And again, I'm not sure about the legalities of that, but of whether we can make that decision or whether we ask the voters. If we ask the voters, Brian can present his case or Karen can present her case. David can present his case and it goes to Australian ballot. and people either say, yes, spend $163,000 next year or don't. And
Can I?
I don't think we want to make, I mean, the only time in my recollection that we made an equipment purchase, a highway department equipment purchase without asking the voters was a few years ago. We bought a pickup truck because we burned out an engine and it was a $60,000 purchase. I'm not aware that we've ever bought something to the tune of $160,000 without asking the voters. I think it would be a mistake to do that either way.
I'm confused.
So-
I'm confused because this is. What do you mean asking the voters? You mean having it in the budget?
No, it would be an article.
Oh, you mean if it broke down, we have to do that?
No, if it breaks down, we have the legal ability to,
Purchase.
we can, for the highway department, because it is essential, for lack of a better term, I don't know whether that's we can choose to purchase equipment because we decide we need it. Typically, we can't go out and spend $160,000 without asking the voters. With a piece of highway equipment, we can, because that's the way statute reads.
So I'm not understanding what you just said about we've never purchased something at 160,000 without asking voters. I'm not understanding where that comes.
We
from.
never have, I don't think.
But why is that coming into the equation?
Because we've been transparent.
Because we could right now.
Right.
Because
You mean
typically,
outright versus borrowing?
exactly.
Okay, that's the clarification.
Well,
I needed. Okay.
and yeah, I mean, outright versus Barrett, yes.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Because if we're
Yes.
borrowing money, we have to ask the
Yes.
voters.
Okay.
If we have money in the fund, and that would be something, we'd also be setting precedent going forward. If we're going to have a reserve fund for the highway department,
Right.
I think we'd be well advised always to ask to take money out of that reserve fund in order to purchase equipment, as opposed to go, unless it's an emergency and you need to do it, then you do it,
Right.
So David, I have a question for you just about this piece that we have not come to agreement on, about possibly putting it off a year. If Brian were to be able to get an answer to how quickly could we get a replacement loader if this broke down, and that answer were within a week, would you strongly say, well, we should wait?
Well, I can't, I'm not going to answer that directly. I'm going to say something else first and then try to answer it. First thing I want to say is it's important to me that we're not opposed in a way. What I'm trying to do is the same thing you're trying to do, is build an equipment fund so we can start buying equipment without spending interest.
Right.
And I just have a different idea about how to do that than you do. So it's important to me that we stay on the same team about that. I would, if it was my choice, I would probably choose to not buy the loader this year, to build the equipment fund quicker if the voters voted that in. Because it would give us another year's surplus if there is one, to add to the fund, and then reassess the loader then. I don't know the condition of the loader well enough to be able to answer your question. If I knew it better, I only took Brian's word on it. He was pretty confident it was a good loader, and that he was pretty confident it was going to continue to run.
So you would vote to not buy it this year, even though we don't know how quickly we could get a replacement one if it broke down?
I'm pretty confident we could get one pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
I mean,
the problem with getting one is that, as Karen pointed out in a conversation we had, it's kind of wasted money to rent a loader when you're going to buy one anyway. So you wouldn't want to do that if you didn't have to. And I agree with that. So,
Got it.
the other question that comes up, and this is not a liability for us probably directly, but it would potentially be a liability for our insurance company if, for example, we were to put off that purchase and, we have a storm in which there's black ice, the loader breaks down, we can't load the trucks in time,
right.
Somebody gets in an accident, technically they could probably sue the town for lack of maintenance. Where does that come into this? What's the likelihood of that? I don't know, but it is something that does come into the equation. The other part for Brian is certainly the just the worry part of it of, I have a piece of equipment that's 11 years old and we're using it at 4 a.m. to load trucks because there is an ice storm coming. What's the feeling of that? And I'm not disagreeing with David's perspective at all. It's the difference in some ways of a municipality versus and
Exactly.
how you choose to spend your money. I mean, if you were a business owner, if I were a business owner in this circumstance, and I knew I could get one, I could rent one the next day if I had to, or even probably, the next day, I would say, you know what, that's a risk worth taking because it doesn't matter to me. For a municipality, is it worth that risk? I don't know. Personal opinion, you know?
Okay.
This isn't something we're going to decide tonight anyway.
No,
right?
I
We're just putting
it-
stuff
it
out.
needs
Okay.
to
Yeah.
be out there again.
Good.
And
But we are gonna, our articles are, no, petitions for articles are due on the 14th. When do we have to have our articles?
ours are not due
Till
until
the 30th.
29th.
30th, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got a couple more weeks and then,
We have one, next week, I would like,
to be pretty clear,
Because, we don't
Yeah.
have another
Yeah.
meeting.
right.
yeah, no, I agree, but we're probably not gonna have all, are you gonna present us with all our articles next week?
Yeah, I have them pretty much together.
You do?
So
Okay.
it just depends on,
So that was one general question, and the second general question was, do we want to bring to the voters the suggestion that we create a reserve fund? And it sounds like we're in agreement that we do, is that true?
I think we should, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need to take a vote on that or no?
Not yet.
No.
Okay.
I mean, next week we can do that, because we can
I
sort
didn't know
of
if we
do
had to be
this all house
an
cleaning.
official thing.
Well,
Okay.
essentially what we'll do is we'll vote on the articles.
Right,
So if we have a sense that the three of us all agree on
Yeah.
that, which I think we do,
Yes, we asked.
then we ask Karen to draft an article that's
Yeah.
appropriate for
Yeah.
Great.
Right, perfect. So I'll be looking at Brian's numbers too. And put them on something that's.
And the article won't get into specifics about where the money comes from, it will
No.
just be a
No.
general, and then we
Yes.
decide, or we Karen suggests and we say, yes, that's how to do it.
Well, in this instance, it would probably want to say, would the voters like to move money from surplus into an equipment fund,
Yeah, it's
right?
gonna come out, it will state that
Exactly.
in the article. Larry will review our warning as well.
Can we then, during that year that they voted on it, put any amount from surplus in that account as many times as we want, or does it have to be a fixed amount?
It doesn't have to be a fixed amount.
It does not,
It'll be
okay.
based on surplus. you know?
Okay,
If you,
so once they've decided
Right.
that we can do it
Yeah.
whatever way we want
yeah,
to.
there's.
Really?
Because
That
that's
doesn't make sense to
interesting.
me.
I
Yeah,
thought
that
it had
doesn't
to be
make
a
sense.
specific amount,
I think it does. Well, I don't know, but
that's what it sounds.
No, because it's, some year you might not, usually it's a fixed amount, so you can build it.
well, in this, right, for
Right,
example, in
right.
the article we would be presenting this
Yes.
year, we would be saying, would the voters of Putney like to move $151,000 or what it is
Yeah,
from surplus into a reserve fund for the
Right.
purchase of future equipment?
right.
Or in this case, it would be 162 because you'd be adding the 11 with the 151, if that's what we went with the plan that you had talked about, right?
Right,
Because that other 11 is part of the surplus too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll figure it out.
Got
Okay, great.
Well, no, see, I wouldn't put that 11 in there, David.
So then the thing that's complicated about this, for
That's why I was
for the
asking the
purchase of this
question, I
piece of equipment next year would be, one is contingent upon the other. So, Article 7, for example, would say, shall the town of Putney move X amount from surplus into an equipment purchase fund? And then the next article would be, shall $163,000 be spent from the equipment purchase fund? Or in this year, it would be from surplus.
Right.
So, but you can't have,
That's why I was asking the
one
specifics
article
of it.
that
Right.
that makes the other one. Although you can, it just has to be worded properly. It has to say,
Right.
on the assumption that Article 7 passes, shall
Right.
the town of Putney purchase a piece of equipment. So, but if we're purchasing it we'd be purchasing it out of surplus, so we'd
Yes.
have two different articles based on taking money from surplus for specific reasons. One to move it into a fund, and one to purchase a piece of equipment, if we were to purchase the piece of equipment
Right,
in that following year.
right. Yeah, it's a little confusing, you know, step by step.
But we could move money into we could, even if then if it were voted in the positive to move money into an equipment fund and in the negative to move money for the purchase of a vehicle, then that would just remain as surplus, and then the following year we could ask to move it into the equipment fund.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
something you may wish to consider regarding timing is, yes, indeed, you have to have the voters at town meeting vote a reserve fund. But that, I believe, will be operative only at the beginning of the next fiscal year, July 1st, 2021. So the question is, what happens until then? And actually, you're not allowed to carry a surplus from one year to another, from one fiscal year to another, just as you're not allowed to carry a fiscal deficit from one fiscal year to another.
I think we are in the highway fund, but I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure highway funds are exempt from that, but I might be wrong. But I think, and you can carry it from one year to the next, you just can't carry it beyond that, I think. Maybe I'm wrong about that too. I don't know. That's a question for Karen to think about in the next week.
Well, since I brought it up, I'll simply mention, I'm quoting now the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. A reserve fund allows the select board to roll over money that is placed in the fund and not spent from year to year. This is contrary to the general rule of budgeting under Vermont law, which is that money not spent in a budget year must be reallocated the following year as part of the budget approval process at town meeting. That's what I was referring to a moment ago.
Yeah, no, and I think that's basically what I was sensing too, is that you can't let it sit for more than a year.
Right.
But when you end up with a budget with a surplus, obviously you don't necessarily spend it in that year because you don't know what you're going to spend it on. And you don't, just that, the timing of that would make it, yeah. I think we're in agreement, Mr. Fairman, but thank you for pointing that out.
I'm not sure we are, Mr. Chairman, because you folks seem to be discussing carrying the surplus forward from this fiscal year to the next fiscal year. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm simply saying I'm simply raising the point as something that probably is worth checking.
Sorry, yeah, no, that is a good point. But I think I think that what you were talking about statutorily is in the general, related to the general fund. Does it also specifically mention the highway fund? I can't remember whether you said that, because I think highway funds work differently.
It simply says that a reserve fund lets you roll over money. Quote, this is contrary to the general rule of budgeting under Vermont law, which is that money not spent in a budget year must be reallocated the following year as part of the budget approval process at town meeting. There is no reference to any particular fund. It is simply money in the municipal budget.
A broader statement. Okay, well, we should definitely explore that then. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, so what else do we need to do?
One other item is sidewalks.
Yeah.
I brought that up briefly, but repurposing the landmark phase 2 and phase 3 money that it currently has in the fund balance, $145,480.
And so which fund is that? That is the sidewalk fund?
Yeah, phase 2, phase 3 sidewalk.
Okay.
Which that sidewalk is completed, so there is a balance in the fund. In the general fund, we have the sidewalk reserve. And technically, it should be in the highway department because it's a highway
item.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to move it over there, but what I also would like to do, or what I'd like to propose to the select board, is that we repurpose this money, phase 2, phase 3 sidewalk, by taking and paying off the sidewalk loan 1 year early. So we have 2 payments left, one this year and one for FY22. So if we take $28,105 and pay that loan off in February, that $28,000 is in the budget and it would fall into the surplus at the end of 21.
So we have 2 payments of 28,000 due. Is that correct?
Correct.
For a total of 56. Okay. And we have 145 in the fund. And would next year's payment, you may have said this and I missed it, would next year's or this year's payment be coming out of that fund anyway?
No.
Okay.
That's already
It's already in
budgeted.
the
That's budget. That's a line item where in
Yes.
general fund.
It's in the, it's in the highway fund
It's in the highway fund.
under the
Okay.
capital
Okay.
debt service.
Yeah.
So again, by doing that, we create the reserve, which in turn, will remain in that particular, that surplus can go anywhere at that point in the highway department.
So I just have a question based on what Howard just talked about. Sorry, Mr. Chairman just talked about. It sounds like you're suggesting that we move money that's in the general fund into the highway fund?
It's a reserve fund that is in the general fund for sidewalk.
And so I just want to make sure that, because what the discussion was is that there are limitations on what we do with the general fund, but not what we do with the highway fund.
Well, maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure, is that completely okay to do? Because
Well-
what we're doing essentially, just a second, is, in my mind, what we're doing essentially is we're taking money that has restrictions, putting it into a place that may not have restrictions. Can we just do that?
Well, I don't know whether we have to ask to do that.
There's still restrictions, okay? So
It's
this,
still a sidewalk fund.
it's still a sidewalk reserve fund. So basically, it's in the wrong budget. It needs to be in the correct budget.
So can we just choose to do that, or do we have to ask to do that?
I'm not sure. I'll have to find the
Okay.
answer out because I don't want to get this off.
So,
Hung up on something.
but
That's what I
I
heard.
think part of your question also was then, if we have it there, can it stay there without it having to be spent within? Maybe I was reading too much into it, but it's a reserve fund either way, so it doesn't fall under surplus. So
Right,
that doesn't then
right.
mean that we have to spend it within X amount of time.
We're allowed to roll it over.
That's a good
Howard's
follow-up
words.
question. That wasn't what I was, but that's good to know. My question was more just the general idea of taking money from a place where there are restrictions and moving it to a place where there aren't restrictions.
Right.
That seems like there needs to be some checks and balances for that.
Yes.
Yes, I think because it's a reserve fund, those checks and balances would still be there.
Okay.
Because they're gonna be specific for the sidewalk,
Exactly.
period.
What we would have to ask permission for, I'm guessing, would be to take money out of that reserve fund and repurpose it for a different use.
Right, absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that anyway.
So it would continue to be a reserve fund for the sidewalk, but it would reside in the highway department budget.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And so if we made that early payment too, we would still have $117,375 in the sidewalk reserve fund. And it also, right now, we're putting $10,000 in the general fund for sidewalk maintenance. So that would be eliminated because it would be all in one place.
And we would no longer contribute 10,000 even to the highway either?
You wouldn't have to because you would have 117,000 unless the voters chose to do that.
Okay.
But I mean, how much?
Well, you'd have
Reserve.
117 plus 30 or whatever, right? Isn't there already
Because we already
some there?
have some in the reserve.
Right, there's like 40,000 in that.
So that you'd have 157.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yep.
which is
More than enough.
probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to build a new sidewalk?
No.
No.
Although you could, for a small portion, that would certainly be a match.
Right.
So
Definitely not.
I feel like, just because I don't know a lot about this, that as long as we do what we need to do legally,
Yeah.
following
Oh,
VLCT.
come on. Man, so uptight.
What fun are you?
Proposing is fine with me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, it's to simplify the
Yes.
accounting,
The
really.
account, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it would appear to be the appropriate place for it, so it makes sense.
All right, so I'll check on that and have it answered by next week. I guess I can take this down. So there's your draft for your highway department.
Can't read it, but
I can't read it
I
yet.
saw it on here earlier. It's interesting, actually, seeing, I don't remember us ever having them in a pie chart form, and
It was this year I did it.
it's
because-
it's informative in a different way.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to, continue that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people see visually.
Well, it's just visual, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, it's very
and
different.
they get it quicker, and, so whatever helps. And
All right.
I'll email you those, all those sheets with the graphs,
So we've now gone through all of our
budget.
budget discussion stuff. Any other questions or comments on budget? No. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the community service award and town report dedication, and also for the discussion of an employment issue.
So moved.
Do you say that again, or just say so moved? So moved. There you go.
You second, David.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to enter executive session for the purpose of discussion of community service award and town report dedication and an employee concern. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
All right, stop recording.